you want to, but I don't know that it's really necessary for the presentation. I think it's going to be a lot of us listening to Terry and seeing what he has to share. And I know sometimes with Teams, the bandwidth gets a little big if we have a lot of people on video.
Yep. Yep. All right, Terry, we got the recording going, transcriptions going. Everybody on the line, this is just for internal purposes, so we will not use this against you in any way. Any questions you ask will be strictly between you and Terry, and I won't pay any attention to the errors that are asked. So Terry, thanks for joining us. As mentioned earlier, Terry's been a friend for a long time. He's actually done a little bit of consulting for the Citygate Network Association headquarters office as well, and it's just been amazing. In fact, if you've been reading some of the articles that I've written in the Citygate magazine, the past 3 articles have been about cybersecurity and how 60% of cyber claims or cyber losses typically involve an inside individual, a staff member, somebody on your team. And that was kind of like a little shocking statistic, but a lot of what I've learned over the years has come from my conversations with Terry. Stories, anecdotes. I've watched some of his presentations and just been blown away. So, Terry, I'll let you take and run from here. I appreciate your partnership and willing just to share with us some today.
Yeah, you're welcome, John. And hopefully my slide deck is coming through.
Yeah, no, looks good. Mile High Cyber, 5 security questions for your IT provider.
Yeah, there we go. Well, thanks for joining today. I'm not going to take the whole hour. I don't know if you were hoping to get a long lecture from me, but I do have about 10 to 12 slides that I'm going to step through, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. And John had asked me to talk a little bit about cybersecurity, and he had made the comment that a lot of people think that IT security, cybersecurity is being taken care of by either their IT provider or their IT staff. And time again, when we do evaluations or we come in to help someone who's had a data breach or some kind of security incident, what we find out is that no one was really looking after the security, at least specifically. They bought modern products, they bought modern operating systems, and they thought, out of the box, these things would be secure. And so I'm going to give you some questions that you can ask your IT provider or maybe your IT staff, or if you're the person who's in charge of IT, that you can ask yourself and say, do I have these things handled? And hopefully it'll give you some ideas on the kind of problems we typically see, especially in the small, medium-sized space and with nonprofits, organizations that don't have a ton of money to spend on IT, but they're doing the best that they can to get the mission job done. So a little bit about me. Or the overview. I'll give you a quick introduction of who I am and what I know about cyber. Talk a little about the cyber threat landscape, and then we'll get into the heart of the presentation. I do have a live demo that hopefully you can participate in, and that'll be a kind of an attention-getting step to make sure that you're not dozing off. So who's Terry Bradley and what does he know about cybersecurity? I started out my working career after your typical high school jobs of being a lifeguard and so forth in the Air Force. 1990 Air Force Academy graduate. I worked in the signals intelligence career field, so had wanted to be a pilot, but the needs of the Air Force, as we like to say in the military, dictated otherwise. They had way too many pilots as the Cold War was ending. So they said, we need you to go work in intelligence. And I did that for 8 years, working in signals intelligence for the National Security Agency. And when I got out of the Air Force, I wanted to learn a skill, something that I could do. As an officer in the military, they don't let you do anything. They're like, sorry, Lieutenant, sorry, Captain. We've got this. You just sit in your chair and make sure that that we don't do anything wrong. But you don't get to touch the keyboard. You don't get to do anything fun. And so I wanted to learn a skill. And I went to work at the National Security Agency to do cybersecurity. I did defensive cyber, which is protecting our government systems and our military systems against attack. We did a lot of security testing to make sure the military systems were as secure as they thought they were. And then I also did work on the offensive side. Back in 1998, 2000, the National Security Agency didn't talk too much about that. And I'm still not going to say much about it other than to say that the National Security Agency has an intelligence collection mission, and most of modern intelligence today is collected through computer hacking, through breaking into foreign networks and collecting information. And so, as an Air Force reservist, I got to work on the offensive side. So, for 3 years, I worked both defense and offense at the National Security Agency, and that was sort of like my crash course in cyber. Starting in 2001, worked in the defense industry, a lot of the normal defense contractors you've heard of, Northrop Grumman, Booz Allen Hamilton, and so forth. And then starting in 2011, I really began working primarily in the private sector, nonprofits, and then what we call SLED, state and local and education. So I really kind of left behind the defense, the national security world to try to bring some cybersecurity knowledge into what I consider to be probably an underserved area, small, medium-sized business and nonprofits. In 2020, I founded Mile High Cyber. It was the middle of the pandemic, or turned out to be maybe towards the beginning of the pandemic. And I thought, why not start my own company? If we can do it now during the middle of the worldwide pandemic, we'll probably do okay whenever that ends. And so for almost 3 years now, I've been running my own cybersecurity practice. We're a small cybersecurity consulting firm based here in Colorado Springs. All right, so just to let you know who I am and what I know about cyber. So what is the cyber threat landscape in 2023? I think we're hearing more and more about cybersecurity, which is a good thing for my business. I think a lot of the demand and interest in cybersecurity stems from press reports about data breaches, maybe letters you've gotten in the mail. Maybe you know an organization that's had a serious security incident and they've mentioned how painful and how expensive it was. And so there's, a proliferation of cybersecurity threats. And the cyber intelligence company Mandiant, which was recently purchased by Google, says they're tracking over 2,800 cyber threat groups. So this isn't 2,800 hackers worldwide. This is 2,800 groups. Some of these groups are quite large. Countries like Russia and China have entire organizations devoted to breaking into systems for intelligence collection and in some cases for crime. The North Korean regime is said to have funded about half of their nuclear program through computer hacking, primarily stealing cryptocurrency, not from other governments, but from private individuals and organizations. These cyber threat groups are searching the internet 24/7 for targets, looking for vulnerable systems that they can break into, not necessarily, discriminate against whether or not the target has a lot of resources or not. They're just looking for vulnerable targets. And once they break in, then they figure out, okay, how can we turn this access that we've gotten into money? The cyber threat landscape is highly specialized. If you have this notion that you're up against a teenager in his parents' basement and he's got his hoodie on, you're probably thinking of the wrong threat. These are organized, specialized groups, just like any IT organization, like any software development company. They have internal task tracking systems, they have recruiting, they have benefits, they have bonus structures. These are highly specialized groups, some of which specialize only in gaining access, which they then sell to other people, or some of them focus only on the impact, so deploying ransomware. Some of them only focus on the extortion piece. And so just like in the Industrial Revolution, where we specialized and each person has their particular function in the greater machine, cybercrime is highly specialized and industrialized. and it's all about the money. These are highly motivated individuals who live in parts of the world where the standard of living is probably a lot less than what we enjoy here in the US. So if you're thinking, well, we only have, X thousand dollars in the bank, we're not a big target. That is absolutely a big target for them, and they're happy to try to go after your organization to try to transfer some of that wealth to where they are. Okay, but still the most common objection I hear is, but I'm too small. We're too small. No one knows who we are. No one is targeting us. No one's coming after us. Just a reminder, this isn't about you. And so while maybe people haven't heard of you, or you think you're sort of, in a little corner where no one's going to notice, essentially the way this industrialized process works is a new security advisory comes out. In the screen example here, we've got a Cisco advisory, a critical vulnerability in Cisco security devices that allows remote code execution. So Cisco says, hey, we've noticed there's a problem with our product. Maybe a researcher found it. Maybe they discovered it on their own. But at some point, they issue a security advisory and they tell everyone who's subscribed to those emails, you need to update your system. Now, if you're not subscribed to the security update emails, you probably don't even know this happened. But Cisco or Microsoft or whichever vendor you use issues security advisories. And when those advisories come out, that's a warning to everyone who owns those products that they need to update their systems very soon. Because at the same time that you're getting this advisory to update your product, the bad guys are getting those advisories as well. And they're looking for ways to use the security flaws that are described in the advisory to create exploits and tools that they can then break into your system. So if Cisco says that their new version of their firewall has a vulnerability, the bad guys begin scanning the internet for that particular vulnerability. They don't care who has it, but when they find it, they know that they can break into that system and start doing what we call active exploitation. That means they're in your network. They're looking at your systems. They're looking for more vulnerabilities. They're trying to extract passwords and create backdoors into your system. All of this happens without any consideration of how much money you have or how big you are. This is just the technological side of computer hacking. Break into the system, get the access, then we'll figure out who it is and how to monetize it. And so a lot of organizations who think that they're too small or that they don't matter, or no one's coming after them, they're not taking into consideration how the bad guys get that access in the first place. All right, so this is where we're going to do a live demo. We're going to break it up a little bit. I'm going to attempt to share a different screen, and I want to show you a website that always sort of catches people's attention. This is a website that I use and I've recommended to many other people. This is a website called Have I Been Pwned? Now, for those of you who are video gamers out there, you understand the term pwned. For those of you who are maybe my age or a little bit older, you're like saying, well, what does it mean to be pwned? Well, to be pwned means you've been beaten, you've been owned. And so this is essentially a website where you can check to see if your email's been hacked. Okay, now this isn't necessarily your email account. I'm not saying that the bad guys got into your Gmail or into your Yahoo account, but that your email account has been involved in one of the many, many, many data breaches out there. So let's say, for instance, I register my account at Pizza Hut because I want to get Pizza Hut points or Papa John's points. And then later on, Papa John's or the vendor where I've registered for the points, that vendor gets hacked and the bad guys get all the email addresses and passwords from that website. That gets announced, and this website, Have I Been Pwned, that's run by Troy Hunt in Australia, he catalogs that and creates a database so that you can see if your email address has been involved in a data breach. Now, if you've got my Pizza Hut password, you're probably thinking, so what? You can maybe order some pizzas. Maybe you get a free pizza because you steal my points. The sad truth is that most adults, about 84%, reuse the same passwords over and over and over again. So the bad guys, they're very interested in those Pizza Hut passwords, because chances are if I take your email address and your Pizza Hut password, it might work on another website, say something like fidelity.com. Maybe you're using the same password at all the different websites that you use. And so it's important for you to keep tabs on whether or not your email address and your passwords have been compromised in the past. And this is one safe way that you can check that. So, live demo, I'm going to put my email address in here, Terry, trying to put it in here, .bradley@gmail.com. And let's see how many times my email address has been involved in third-party data breaches. Oh, not good. Looks like my email address, the one that I use to register at third-party websites, has been involved in several data breaches. Going back 2018, website Animoto, which is a website that I have used in the past to create videos and collages and graduation congratulation cards and so forth. That was compromised in 2018. So whatever my password was at Animoto in 2018, that password's known to the bad guys. I shouldn't use that password anywhere else. What other websites that I've used? Cafe Press. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I bought some t-shirts back in 2019. So whatever my password was at Cafe Press, I shouldn't use that password anymore, and so forth. You can go through the list and you can see all the places where your email address was involved in a data breach, and chances are the bad guys got your password from that site, and they maybe will try to use it at other places. You may see some sites on here that you don't recognize. You're like, well, wait a second, what is Canva? I don't even know what Canva is. Well, sometimes, and this is why we have privacy policies, one website will sell your email address to some other website. And so there may be data breaches that you're involved in that you don't even recognize them. And so chances are, you need to be aware of these things and cautious. This is one of the reasons why security experts tell you you have to use a different password at every single website that you visit, because if that password gets stolen from Cafe Press, you don't want them going and using it at USAA Bank or at Fidelity or something that really matters. And so I always recommend, and you'll notice on this website, that you use a password manager. Troy Hunt apparently has partnered with 1Password and promotes that and has a discount code. There are many other ones that are out there. LastPass, KeyPass, Dashlane. I use one called Password Safe, pwsafe.org, which is free for Windows and Android. It does have a small cost if you're using Mac or Apple products, but that's one that you could use that's completely non-cloud based. These ones that are cloud based are highly targeted. I'm not saying not to use them, but if you're concerned about uploading your passwords to the cloud, I would look at pwsafe.org. So just a quick demo, and the reason I show this is because pretty much anyone who's been on the internet for very long is going to show up in this database. Now, if I put my own company's email address in here, you will notice that I don't register a lot of accounts with Mile High Cyber, and so the list is going to be quite a bit shorter. Yep, see, great news, no pwnage. All right, so. But if you've had an email address for any length of time, more than a couple years, you're probably going to show up on this Have I Been Pwned website. So I'm going to take a pause for just a minute and switch back to my slides, but just see if there are any questions. Are you guys tracking any questions about the dark web and how bad guys get these passwords? All right. I think everyone's tracking. So moving along, I've got 5 questions that you can ask your IT provider or your IT staff, or if you're the person who does this, maybe you ask yourself, so you kind of get a check on how good your security is. The first question I ask IT providers is security updates. We see these things, the Windows updates. Chrome has taken to creating a little button when it has an update. You'll see a little button in your Chrome browser that says update. And the longer you ignore that button, the darker red it gets. It kind of turns yellow, then orange, and then red if it's been a really long time. So these security updates come out because there are security problems with products. In fact, in 2022, there were 557 security advisories for Microsoft, Apple, Cisco, Chrome. All the big software vendors are consistently, Microsoft every single week, putting out security updates. And once these security updates come out, the bad guys, the cyber criminals of the world begin reverse engineering those announcements to try to figure out how can I hack these. They don't typically put in the announcement exactly how you can use it to break into systems. But bad guys are pretty sneaky, and if they have a clue as to where the security problem is, then they can hone in on that and create a tool to break in with it. Sometimes the bad guys find these flaws even before the vendors do, and we call those zero-day exploits. So if I'm a security researcher or a hacker and I find a flaw in a Microsoft product or maybe in Zoom or something, I'm going to keep that to myself. I'm not going to tell anyone. I'm going to hold on to that, and it's going to be a zero-day exploit, meaning there's no patch. The clock hasn't started ticking in terms of giving people a chance to patch. Once the advisory is out, then we call that a 1 day. The patch has been out for 1 day, and a lot of the break-ins happen many days after the advisories have been issued. For instance, Log4j, if you endured that fire drill about a year or two back, Log4j was announced, and within 7 days, the Conti ransomware group was out there exploiting system with the Log4j vulnerability and deploying ransomware. So, when those advisories come out, you need to be ready to update your system quickly. Sometimes the patches cause problems. Microsoft's been famous for issuing patches that then cause computers to blue screen or crash. And so it's a balance between trying to patch your systems before the bad guys get to them, but then also making sure that the patch is well tested and doesn't cause any additional problems. So the question here is, what is your goal? What is your goal for security updates? Ask your IT provider, your IT staff, how many days do you intend to patch for critical and high security advisories? In my recommendation, you should definitely be patching in less than 30 days. If it's taking you more than 30 days to patch a critical severity or a high severity security update on all your systems that need that patch, you're really putting yourself at risk of being hacked. In fact, most cyber insurance applications are asking this question. How soon do you patch high and critical security vulnerabilities? You should set a goal for your organization. We're going to patch those within 2 weeks. We're going to patch them within 30 days. You need to have some sort of goal. The follow-on question is, okay, if your goal is 30 days, if your goal is 2 weeks, how long is it actually taking you? Do you have any metrics? Most people that I'm seeing who are filling out cyber security applications, when they answer the question of how long it actually takes them, they don't know the answer. They have no idea. They're like, soon, we're doing it as quickly as we can. Cyber insurance companies want to know how quickly. What data do you have? What metrics do you have? Maybe you push the update against all your systems. Do you know that all the systems got it? This is where vulnerability scanning comes into play. One of our most commonly requested services is vulnerability scanning, vulnerability management, where we are constantly scanning networks to make sure that all the patches are in place, that there aren't any missing, that maybe that critical system that you count on and that needs to be secure actually got the update, and the vulnerability scanner can make a list of systems that are missing updates. that need to go back, and maybe you need to manually patch that system because your automated patching system didn't work. And then keeping those metrics over time, so that when you fill out your application or when you're reporting to the board and they ask you the question, how quickly are we patching these critical systems with security updates, you have an answer. And the answer isn't just, well, we do it as soon as we can. Because sometimes that's not soon enough. Most of the data breaches, most of the big ones like Equifax, Experian, that you've heard about on the news, it's because there were some systems that got overlooked. The patch had been pushed, and everyone thought that it was up to date on all the systems. But in fact, there were a few that got missed, and the bad guys find those. So the first two questions have to do with security updates and software patches. One is, what's your goal in terms of patching? The second is how well you're actually doing. Are you getting those systems patched in less than 30 days? Getting them patched in less than 2 weeks? Because if you don't, they're exposed for long periods of time. Third question, multi-factor authentication. Okay, 10 years ago, multi-factor authentication was hardly even heard of. I remember in the intelligence community, we would have secure ID tokens that would hang around our neck on a little fob, and we'd have to type in a code. Well, that's now become commonplace. Google has made two-factor authentication or two-step authentication mandatory on Gmail. It's built into Microsoft Outlook, Office 365. It's pretty ubiquitous nowadays. This is where you type in your username and your password, and then you have to enter an additional code. Maybe it's only asked for if you log in from a new location or from a new device, but the idea of multi-factor authentication is just because I have your password, maybe because I stole it from Pizza Hut, I shouldn't be able to get into your system. There needs to be a second factor that comes into play to log into a system, especially when remote access is involved. I recommend multi-factor authentication for all remote access. So that's email, file storage, file sharing, and especially VPN, because the VPN, the virtual private network, is going to let someone into your corporate network. So you're like, yes, we have MFA. I talked to my security people. They said we've enabled MFA. Okay, so my question for the IT provider is, what percentage of the users are actually using it? Okay, have you literally enforced it on every single user? What was the current percentage of adoption? You will find that if you do an audit, that not everyone has it enabled. There are certain users who never got around to enrolling themselves, or there may be certain users who have exempted themselves because they can. You're saying exempted themselves. Who would do such a thing? Well, let me tell you that a lot of the managed service providers, the IT outsourcing companies that I work with, I catch them. They're administrators. Turn off MFA for the administrators. For the users, they enforce that because the customers asked for it. But we find administrators of these managed service providers will often turn it off because they've got a lot of work to do. They don't want to type in the code. It's too cumbersome, et cetera, and so forth. And so the people with the most security privileges, a lot of times, are the ones who have turned it off and exempted themselves. Okay. So, ask your IT provider, give me an audit. Show me who all has got it enabled. Show me who has it enforced, because you want to have all your users not only able to use multi-factor authentication or enabled, you want it enforced. You want to force people to use it because that's what the bad guys, that's what's going to slow them down more than anything else. All right, here's a question. Major security incidents. Every IT provider out there, every IT team, if you were to ask them who are they going to call in the event of a security incident, they're probably going to tell you, well, we'll handle that. We deal with security incidents all the time. And that's probably true. Phishing emails, password resets, email compromises, those are all pretty basic. But what happens if you have a major security incident, meaning there's been a ransomware incident, and there's no backups, or the backups are corrupted? Maybe you have a major data breach, and you're going to have to report this. Who is your incident response firm? Do you have someone in place who has a pre-negotiated response time or a pre-negotiated rate? Time and time again, I have people calling me and saying, hey, we have a major data breach and we're trying to find someone to help, and no one will help us. They're all busy. They all ask questions like, what's your revenue? Okay. So this is kind of a situation where, in the medical world, if you're having a heart attack, that's not the time to start finding a doctor. You basically get taken to anywhere that will take you and you pay whatever you have to pay. So I would recommend talking to your IT provider, talking to your IT security team about who's your data breach response company. Do you have that locked in? Because once you're having the breach, you're no longer in a position to negotiate a rate, and you also want to make sure that you can get help when you need it. If you're just going to pull out the yellow pages, whatever those are, that's not a good strategy for recovering from a data breach. So make sure that your IT provider, make sure that your IT team has a data breach and incident response firm lined up ahead of time. All right, so these are some hard questions. What are small businesses to do about these? We already mentioned that nonprofits, small, medium-sized organizations, you don't have a lot of resources. You don't have bags of money sitting around. So how do you get this help? One of the ways that I recommend is that you look for a virtual chief information security officer, a vCISO, or in some cases, we call it a fractional CISO. So this is a fractional person. This is a part-time helper, a trusted cybersecurity advisor. This is something that Mile High Cyber provides, and a lot of other companies are jumping on this bandwagon as well. There's a lot of companies who will provide you a fractional security officer to help you build and improve your cybersecurity program. You'd like to have someone, on your team who's a security expert, but cybersecurity experts are hard to find, and when you do find them, they're fairly expensive. So the fractional or the virtual model is a good way to go to get unbiased help and support. If you ask your IT provider, do I need the security product? The answer is always going to be yes, because they get to sell you an additional thing. A vCISO can help you sort through what you have. Is this a redundant capability? Is this something that you really need? Is this worth the investment? All right, so final takeaways here today. Cybersecurity programs don't create and run themselves. I do some work in the energy, in the oil and gas industry, and those people are very safety conscious. I see posters. They have people appointed who are the safety officers. And they don't just tell the oil workers who are going out on the rig, hey, be safe out there. Try not to cut your hand off. They have actual programs in place to try to make sure that people are forced to be safe, and that the safeguards are in place to keep them safe. Same with cybersecurity. You would think that everything in 2023 is just written well and that all the security features are enabled by default, but sadly they're not. So you really need a program to make sure that your cybersecurity program is addressing the threats, which are constantly changing and evolving, and there's someone who's running that program, someone at the helm of that ship. Trusted cybersecurity advisor is a way that you can help prioritize those investments. You don't have an unlimited budget. You don't have unlimited time to focus on this. So having a cybersecurity advisor is one way that you can improve your program in an efficient way. And I will tell you, the old adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I think in the cybersecurity world, it's worth a ton of data breach response time. The amount of money that you'll spend doing preventative cybersecurity, it just is so much smaller than what you would spend to recover from a data breach. I've often said that I wish when we go to do data breach response that I could just wear a GoPro on my head and people could see the pain and suffering that cybersecurity incident victims go through. Anger's flaring, fingers pointing, everything grinds to a halt. Believe me, you do not want to have a cybersecurity incident if you can prevent it. So the key is to do what you can now to do preventative medicine so that you don't end up in the cybersecurity ER. Now, John had asked me to throw in some bonus material because he said, "Hey, what can people do for free?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm happy to provide that." So some of this falls into the category of what you can do for your organization. Some of this is what you can do as a private individual. So, not only protecting your organization, but protecting your own accounts, because the bad guys don't care whether it's your work email or your personal email. They're looking for things to break into and ways to turn that into money. So my 5 free tips for you is number one, turn on that MFA. Almost every account that is meaningful nowadays, Microsoft, Gmail, certainly all your financial institutions have multi-factor authentication available. Turn that on. The other thing is enable alerts. I bank with USAA Bank, and they've got a variety of alerts that you can enable. I have them all turned on. And what that means is anytime one of my credit cards is used, one of my debit cards is used for anything over $1, I get a little text message or an email. Now people say, well, isn't that bothersome? I said, no, it's worth it to me to know when my debit card is used. I go to the store, I buy something, within a minute or two, I get an alert saying your debit card was used. I'm like, yeah, that was me. And it's not too much of a cumbersome problem for me to get that text message. If I get an alert at 9 p.m. at night and it's not me, I certainly want to know someone's using my credit card or debit card. So where you can on your financial institutions, enable those alerts, turn those on, get used to seeing them. And that way, if your card or your account is accessed without your knowledge, or without you actually doing it, you'll get an alert. Third thing I would recommend is get rid of any password files you have on your computer. You know what I'm talking about. That secret file that you don't think anybody knows about called passwords.txt. Or maybe you've got a draft email in some folder called stuff. Whatever you think you've hidden it as, believe me, the hackers are really good at finding those. They will search through your hard drive. If they ever get access to your computer or access to your email, the very first thing they're going to look for is passwords, and they're good at finding them. Just like people will hide money under their mattress, bad idea. Burglars know how to find that. Hackers know how to find password files. Put all those passwords in a password manager, use unique passwords for every site. And then also remember that most websites allow you to reset your password if you provide answers to security questions. So you need to make sure those security questions or the answers are not something that bad guys can search for. Don't make it your high school mascot. I can probably find that out through social media. Don't make it your mother's maiden name. Or if you do, don't put the real one. And put the actual answers to your security questions in your password manager. Most password managers have a spot for the username, the password, and then probably a notes field where you can put the security questions you chose and the answers that you put. When I when I answer a security question like, what was your first job? I put something down like astronaut. I mean, it's not my first job, but I don't want anyone to like look up what my first job was and reset my password. So get rid of those password files, get rid of those little, those secret little files that you don't think anyone knows about, that spreadsheet with every single password to every single site that you have, and put that stuff in a password manager. Fourth, I already mentioned this in the live demo, do dark web checks from time to time. Troy Hunt's site, that Have I Been Pwned website, you can sign up, you can subscribe to that. They'll put your email address on file, and every time your email address is involved in a dark web exposure or a data breach, they'll send you an email just as a reminder. I hope you didn't use this password anywhere else. And oh, by the way, now's the time to change it. And then finally, this, you probably don't think of this as a security issue, but I would say to reboot your devices weekly. A lot of security updates happen when you reboot your computer, and a lot of malware that happens on smartphones is not able to survive reboots. Um, this is a tip from the National Security Agency, number 5. Even as sneaky as the NSA is, they know if they hack a phone and the bad guy reboots it, they're going to lose access. most malware cannot survive a reboot on a smartphone. So go ahead and reboot that thing every once in a while. It might help with performance. And if you have somehow, gotten your phone hacked, it'll help make sure that that malware doesn't survive long term. All right, so that's all I had prepared today. That's about 40 minutes, and we've got time for Q&A. My contact information is here. If you ever need my help, be glad to answer any questions you have or help you with your cybersecurity. But I'll just go ahead and open it up to questions if people have them.
Yeah, so we did have a comment shared by Mark Brockman from Houston, Texas. And he said when he looked on the Have I Been Pwned site that he didn't recognize any of the 6 websites listed. Can you just
Yeah.
restate that or comment on that?
Sure, sure. Yeah, a lot of these, the very first data breach letter I got in the mail was from Heartland Payment Systems. And I can remember thinking at the time, Heartland Payment Systems, who in the world is that? I never shop at Heartland Payment Systems. Well, Heartland Payment System was a big credit card processing company. And so when I bought something at Target or at, 7-Eleven, that payment was actually processed at a third party that I'd never heard of. And when they got compromised, my credit card information got stolen. So a lot of these data breach websites that you'll find on Have I Been Pwned, they're third parties that you may or may not do business with, but someone you do business with has sold your email address to them. And so there could be marketing companies, they could be market research firms, they could be a payment processing, but somewhere in the back end of the economy, these people have acquired your email address. And that's one of the reasons why we're starting to see so many consumer privacy laws, because people are unhappy to find out that their personal information, their email addresses, and so forth have been sold to third parties without their knowledge.
Awesome. Anybody else that would like to ask questions, feel free to jump on. So Mark is asking in follow-up because he's got a lot of background noise. What should I do if my email address is compromised? Change the email address?
Yeah, I would say you can keep that email address. What you need to do is if you see, say, for instance, I showed you how Animoto had been compromised and my email was involved in that data breach. The two things you need to do is number one, change your password at the impacted site, at Animoto or at LinkedIn or whatever. And then also make sure that you're not using that password anywhere else. We already said use a unique password at every single website, but we also know that people, take some shortcuts. And so maybe you have a password that you use for all the places that you don't really care about, the library and Sally Beauty and some places just like we need an email address, and so you give it to them. You need to make sure that you're not using those compromised passwords anywhere else, because the bad guys will do what's called a password stuffing attack. They will take that password that they know, and they'll try it at all the other places they think you might have reused it. So they'll try it at Facebook, they'll try it at common banks, they'll try it on Twitter, and they'll try to see what other accounts they can get into using that same username and password combination. But no, you don't need to change your email address. This is just kind of a fact of life in 2023. Kind of like, if you got junk mail or, some sort of a threatening letter, you wouldn't change your address. You would just deal with it.
Right. Yeah, I did a quick search and my first breach showed up in 2013 from the Adobe breach.
All right,
and then of course
congratulations.
thank you, a couple
Yeah.
others tied to website administration and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I would
anybody else
tell
with
you,
questions?
one of mine is on my list is LinkedIn, and we heavily mine those LinkedIn passwords. Those are available, at a variety of places, and we've actually gotten into customer networks using people's compromised LinkedIn password back from 2017, and you just think, I can't believe
So
this person hasn't changed their VPN password since 2017.
So now you're letting on to the fact that you're an ethical hacker. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Companies pay us to break into their networks from time to time doing what we call a penetration test.
Anybody else with questions? John has asked, do you recommend identity protection services? One of my pwned instances was a fraud protection service.
Yeah, I would say that those monitoring services are really important. I don't know if I would pay for the LifeLock where they, promise $1 million worth of insurance, but I would say you need to have at least one service that monitors, for new inquiries, that monitors changes in your credit. I think that's worthwhile. A lot of banks provide that for free. Some credit card companies provide it for free. I've got a couple of them that I use that are just provided for free by my bank or the credit card company.
Great. So anecdotal little story. Terry can fill in the gaps. One of my first interactions with Terry, he was hired by an organization to just do a security check. And Terry, how long did it take you to get into the system administrator's computer and find his password file? Do you remember that one?
I'm not sure which one that was, and I'm sure you don't want to say who it was, but it can really vary. I think we've probably it's run the gamut from maybe it's taken us a couple weeks for some organizations. I think there have been some cases where we've gotten in within 5 minutes. I mean, I was at a cybersecurity conference last week, and the Secret Service was there, and they said, the biggest compromises they're seeing this month are people with routers that have a password of Cisco. So, username Cisco, password of Cisco, or admin, test. So really, really, really weak passwords. In fact, we found a Cisco router just 2 weeks ago, and the customer was shocked. First of all, they didn't even know they had that router. It was on their backup internet circuit. And second of all, the managed service provider, the MSP, was the one who set it up. And since it was a backup, they hadn't done any hardening. However, when we logged in with Cisco, we set up a full VPN and logged into their internal network in their office and showed them how we did that. And yeah, they were quite surprised. That took about 5 minutes.
Yeah, the one I'm thinking of is the organization we served at together, and I think you said it took about 15 minutes to get into the.
Yeah, I remember they were using old wired equivalent privacy for their Wi-Fi network, and we were able to crack that password, within 15 minutes, and then get access to the internal network, and then and so on and so on. You get the initial access, and then you just go deeper and deeper.
I have another question, and this is from John in Kansas City. What forms of two-factor authentication do you prefer? Text, Google, type authentication, YubiKey, etc.
Yeah, any multi-factor is better than none. So, I would say initially just get your organization using multi-factor authentication. But if you want to use the best kind of multi-factor authentication, the apps are better, or the hardware token is better, because what we're finding now is bad guys are coming to grips with this multi-factor authentication, and they're tricking users out of their code. So if you use SMS or text message code authentication only, sometimes users can be fooled into giving that to the bad guys. A recent example, someone I know was called by an attacker claiming to be their bank, and the bank said, "Hey, someone's trying to do a wire transfer from your account. We need your help to block that. We're going to send you a code, and you need to give us your code to confirm your identity." Well, this was the bad guys. These were the very people who were trying to do the wire transfer, and they needed to be able to log in. They needed that multi-factor authentication code to complete the login. So when the user gave them the code, the bad guys thanked them, said the wire transfer had been blocked. And of course, this was the bad guys who then completed the wire transfer to the tune of $20,000. So the apps are better because you get a push notification, and Microsoft has recently implemented what they call number matching, which makes it even harder for the bad guys to trick you out of that, because essentially what you have to do is you have to type the number on your screen into the computer where you're logging in, and that gives people some pause. Like, well, you need this number because it says if I'm not doing this, I shouldn't give you the number. So the apps are better than the SMS messages, and the hardware tokens are probably the most secure, but they're also less convenient and expensive.
Excellent. Any other questions, thoughts? Well, thank you very much, Terry. I appreciate your time, your expertise. I can poke him and keep getting stories out of him. But we'll let you recoup. We'll let you recoup the last 7 minutes of this dedicated hour and use it for something productive. So thank
All
you
right. Well,
so much.
thanks for your time, everyone. It was nice talking with you.
All right. Thank you. We'll see you.
Bye.
Thanks. It was great.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, John.
Oh, you're most welcome. Have a
Thank
great
you.
afternoon.
Thank you, you too. Bye.